Something is buried beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice, and no one will tell you what it really is. In December of 1998, a team of researchers drilling through the Antarctic ice sheet near Lake Vostok hit something that shouldn't exist. Their instruments detected a massive anomaly deep beneath the frozen surface, something so unusual that the entire drilling operation was immediately halted. The scientists were ordered to withdraw, their findings were classified, and to this day, the official explanation for what they found remains suspiciously vague, but that was just the beginning of a series of discoveries in Antarctica that have turned our understanding of Earth's most mysterious continent completely upside down. Antarctica is not supposed to have secrets. It's supposed to be a frozen wasteland, a pristine wilderness of ice and snow where nothing exists except penguins and research stations. For decades, that's exactly what we were told. But satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and brave researchers who ventured into the most remote regions of the continent have uncovered evidence of something far stranger than anyone could have predicted. Massive structures buried under the ice. Unexplained heat signatures emanating from regions that should be frozen solid. Ancient formations that suggest Antarctica wasn't always the frozen desert it is today. And perhaps most disturbing of all, magnetic anomalies so powerful they disrupt navigation equipment and create zones where compasses spin wildly out of control. The continent of Antarctica is roughly 5.5 million square miles of ice, covering land that makes up about 9% of Earth's total land surface. The ice sheet that covers it is in some places nearly 3 miles thick, containing about 90% of the world's ice and 70% of Earth's fresh water. If all that ice melted, global sea levels would rise by approximately 200 feet, drowning every coastal city on the planet. The continent itself sits over the South Pole, and the extreme conditions make it one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Temperatures regularly drop below -80 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds reach speeds of 200 miles per hour. The sun doesn't rise for months during the Antarctic winter, plunging the continent into complete darkness. Given these harsh conditions, you'd think Antarctica would hold little interest except for climate research and studying penguins. Yet since the early 1900s, nations around the world have competed fiercely for territorial claims in Antarctica. Nazi Germany sent expeditions there in the 1930s. The United States launched Operation High Jump in 1946 and 1947, the largest Antarctic expedition in history, involving over 4,000 personnel, 13 ships, and multiple aircraft. The official mission was to establish research bases and train personnel in polar conditions. But the expedition was led by Admiral Richard Byrd, a decorated naval officer, and the military resources devoted to the mission seemed excessive for a simple training exercise. Even stranger, the expedition was cut short after only 8 weeks when it was scheduled to last 6 to 8 months. Admiral Byrd returned and made cryptic statements to the press about encountering a new threat and the need to prepare for the possibility of invasion by aircraft coming from the polar regions. What exactly did Admiral Byrd encounter in Antarctica? The official records are sparse and heavily redacted, but Byrd's statements combined with rumors that have circulated among military personnel for decades suggest the expedition encountered something unexpected. Some reports claim Byrd's aircraft were engaged by unknown craft that moved with impossible speed and maneuverability. Other accounts describe the discovery of ice-free areas and strange openings in the ice leading to caverns below. Byrd himself spoke in interviews about discovering a land beyond the pole with mountains, forests, and evidence of habitation. These statements were dismissed as the confused ramblings of a man affected by the extreme conditions. But Byrd was an experienced polar explorer who had made previous expeditions to both the North and South Poles. He wasn't someone prone to hallucinations or exaggeration. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959, designating Antarctica as a scientific preserve and banning military activity on the continent. On the surface, this seems like an enlightened agreement to protect one of Earth's last pristine wilderness areas. But the timing is suspicious. Why, at the height of the Cold War, When the United States and Soviet Union were competing for dominance everywhere on the globe, did these rival superpowers suddenly agree to demilitarize Antarctica and restrict access? What motivated nations that couldn't agree on anything else to cooperate when it came to this frozen continent? Some researchers believe the treaty wasn't about protecting Antarctica, but about containing something found there, preventing public access to discoveries that world governments decided needed to remain secret. Since the treaty was signed, Antarctica has been the site of intensive research by multiple nations, with bases scattered across the continent. The official focus is on climate science, glaciology, and studying the unique ecosystem. But many of these research stations are located in remote interior regions far from the coast, in areas where the conditions are most extreme and logistics are most difficult. Why place stations in such inaccessible locations if the research could be conducted more easily closer to the coast? The expense and difficulty of maintaining these interior stations suggests they're there for reasons beyond convenient climate monitoring. Some of these stations are operated by military organizations, despite the Antarctic. Treaties ban on military activity. The justification is that military personnel and equipment are necessary for logistical support, but the distinction between scientific research and military operations becomes blurry when you examine the actual activities taking place. Lake Vostok, mentioned at the beginning, is one of the most intriguing features of Antarctica. It's a subglacial lake, meaning it exists beneath the ice sheet, roughly the size of Lake Ontario and over 1,600 feet deep at its deepest point. The lake has been sealed beneath more than 2 miles of ice for millions of years, completely isolated from the surface. Scientists theorize that the lake's water remains liquid due to geothermal heat from below and the immense pressure of the ice above. The idea of a liquid water lake beneath the Antarctic ice captured scientific imagination because it might harbor unique forms of life that evolved in complete isolation. Multiple nations have attempted to drill down to the lake, with Russia's Vostok station eventually succeeding in penetrating the ice and reaching the water below in February of 2012. But here's where things get interesting. Before the Russian team reached the lake, numerous anomalies were detected. Magnetic surveys revealed a massive magnetic anomaly centered over the lake's southern end, an anomaly so large and powerful that it suggests the presence of something metallic or highly magnetic buried beneath the lake bed. Ground-penetrating radar detected what appeared to be a circular structure over 60 miles in diameter beneath the ice, with geometric patterns suggesting artificial construction. Temperature readings showed unexpected warmth emanating from specific locations, inconsistent with natural geothermal activity. And seismic data revealed cavities and voids beneath the lake that shouldn't exist according to geological models. When the Russian drilling team finally penetrated the ice and extracted water samples from Lake Vostok, the results were immediately classified. Scientists who worked on the project were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. Western researchers who had been collaborating with the Russians suddenly found themselves shut out. The official announcement spoke only of finding bacterial life in the samples, which wasn't surprising given that extremophile bacteria have been found in the most unlikely environments on Earth. But the secrecy surrounding the Lake Vostok findings suggests they discovered something far more significant than simple bacteria. Samples that were supposed to be shared with the international scientific community never materialized. Data that should have been published remained classified. And researchers who asked too many questions found their funding cut and their careers derailed. What could be beneath Lake Vostok that would warrant such extreme secrecy? One possibility that's been proposed is a crashed extraterrestrial craft preserved in the ice for thousands or millions of years. The magnetic anomaly would be consistent with a large metallic object. The geometric patterns detected by radar could be the structure of an artificial vehicle. The heat signatures might indicate residual power sources still active after all this time. This sounds like science fiction. But consider that Antarctica's ice preserves everything that falls onto it. If a craft crashed in Antarctica during a warmer period when the continent wasn't completely frozen, subsequent ice ages would have buried it under miles of ice, perfectly preserved in a frozen tomb. Another theory suggests that what lies beneath Lake Vostok isn't alien but terrestrial. the ruins of an ancient civilization that existed on Antarctica before it became frozen. We know from geological evidence that Antarctica wasn't always covered in ice. Millions of years ago, it was positioned further north and had a temperate climate with forests and vegetation. But even more recently, perhaps only 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, parts of Antarctica may have been ice-free. Ancient maps, like the Piri Reis map from 1513, appear to show the coastline of Antarctica with surprising accuracy, including coastal features now buried under ice. How could medieval cartographers have mapped a continent that wasn't officially discovered until 1820? The implication is that these maps were copied from much older sources, created at a time when Antarctica's coast was visible and possibly inhabited. While the mysteries beneath Lake Vostok are hidden under miles of ice, other Antarctic anomalies are visible from the surface, and they're equally baffling. In 2012, images captured by satellites and confirmed by ground expeditions revealed pyramid-shaped formations in several locations across Antarctica. These aren't metaphorical pyramids, vague mountain peaks that sort of look pyramidal if you squint. These are structures with four distinct sides meeting at a point, with angles and symmetry that appear too perfect to be natural formations. The most prominent of these is located in the Ellsworth Mountains near the Vinson Massif, Antarctica's highest peak. The pyramid structure measures approximately 1,200 feet from base to apex, comparable in scale to the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its sides align with the cardinal directions with remarkable precision. The angles of the faces are consistent with each other, suggesting intentional design rather than random erosion. Geological analysis of the exposed rock shows erosion patterns inconsistent with natural wind and ice weathering. The surfaces are too smooth, the edges too sharp, the overall geometry too regular. Natural mountains form through tectonic uplift, volcanic activity, or glacial carving, processes that produce irregular shapes, jagged peaks, and asymmetrical features. Perfect pyramids don't occur in nature without some form of intelligent design. The mainstream explanation for these pyramid structures is that they're nunataks, mountain peaks that protrude above the ice sheet, shaped by erosion into forms that coincidentally resemble pyramids. This explanation is offered confidently and presented as settled science, case closed, nothing to see here. But geologists who have actually examined the structures up close tell a different story. The rock surfaces show evidence of tooling, parallel grooves, and linear cuts that suggest artificial shaping rather than natural erosion. The placement of the structures in relation to each other hints at intentional positioning, with alignments to astronomical features similar to what's seen in ancient megalithic sites around the world. And most damningly, ice core samples taken near the structures date the exposed rock to a period much more recent than the supposed millions of years these mountains have been in place. If these pyramids are artificial, who built them and when? The conventional timeline of human civilization makes Antarctic pyramid construction impossible. Humans only developed the technology and social organization necessary for monumental architecture around 5,000 years ago. And even the most ambitious ancient civilizations were confined to temperate regions with access to resources and favorable climates. The idea that an advanced civilization existed in Antarctica capable of building massive stone pyramids contradicts everything we're taught about human history. Yet here these structures stand, undeniably real, photographed from multiple angles, confirmed by scientific expeditions, and still officially dismissed as natural formations, despite evidence to the contrary. The existence of ancient pyramids in Antarctica would require rewriting not just human history, but Earth's geological history. If the pyramids were built during a time when Antarctica was ice-free, that places their construction at least 15,000 years ago before the Younger Dryas climate event that plunged Earth back into Ice Age conditions. This means an advanced civilization existed during the last Ice Age, a civilization sophisticated enough to build monumental architecture, organize large-scale construction projects, and potentially possess technological knowledge we associate only with much more recent societies. The implications are staggering. Everything we believe about the progression of human civilization, about the timeline of human development, would need to be reconsidered. But the pyramid structures are just one category of anomaly visible on Antarctica's surface. Satellite imaging has revealed numerous other features that defy easy explanation. There are perfectly circular formations hundreds of feet in diameter, too regular to be natural lakes or craters. There are linear features extending for miles in perfectly straight lines, cutting across mountains and valleys in ways that natural geological processes don't produce. There are what appear to be building foundations, rectangular shapes with right angles and geometric precision, partially buried in ice but still discernible from above. And most intriguingly, there are areas where the ice has collapsed or melted away to reveal what looks like ancient stonework, walls and structures made from fitted blocks in patterns reminiscent of megalithic construction found in South America and the Middle East. Google Earth has become an unexpected tool for discovering these Antarctic anomalies. Armchair researchers scanning satellite images of Antarctica have identified dozens of unusual features that warrant investigation. While many of these discoveries can be explained as pareidolia, the human tendency to see patterns and faces in random shapes, others are harder to dismiss. When multiple independent researchers identify the same features, when those features show characteristics inconsistent with natural formation, when attempts to investigate are blocked or discouraged, the possibility of genuine anomalies must be taken seriously. One particularly intriguing discovery made through satellite analysis is what appears to be an entrance to an underground facility. Located in Queen Maud Land, the feature shows a clearly defined opening in the mountainside, roughly 200 feet wide and perfectly rectangular. The opening leads into darkness, suggesting a tunnel or cavity extending into the mountain. Attempts to get closer ground images have been blocked by authorities citing safety concerns and environmental protection regulations. But why would a natural cave formation require such restricted access? Caves are common in Antarctica, formed by ice melting and refreezing. Yet this particular entrance, with its geometric precision and suspicious location, has become the subject of intense speculation about what might lie within. The speculation centers on the possibility of underground bases or facilities constructed either in the ancient past or in more recent times. During World War II, rumors circulated about Nazi Germany establishing secret bases in Antarctica. These rumors were dismissed as Allied propaganda or post-war conspiracy theories, but declassified documents have confirmed that Germany did send expeditions to Antarctica in the late 1930s, claiming territory and conducting extensive surveys. Ships were dispatched with construction equipment and personnel who remained in Antarctica for extended periods. The official explanation is that Germany was interested in whaling and securing access to whale oil, but the resources devoted to the Antarctic expeditions seem disproportionate to whaling operations, and some of the claimed activities, like mapping extensive interior regions, go beyond what whaling would require. After the war, numerous high-ranking Nazi officers and scientists disappeared, never to be accounted for. The standard explanation is that they fled to South America, and indeed many Nazis were later discovered living in Argentina, Brazil, and other South American countries. But some researchers believe that not all the missing Nazis went to South America, that some went further south to Antarctica, where bases had been prepared during the pre-war expeditions. This theory gained traction when Admiral Byrd's Operation High Jump, launched just a year after the war ended, seemed more like a military invasion force than a scientific expedition. Why would the United States send such overwhelming force to Antarctica unless they expected to encounter resistance? Eyewitness accounts from Operation High Jump personnel, though officially denied and dismissed, speak of encountering advanced aircraft that emerged from the ice, craft with capabilities far beyond anything possessed by Allied or Axis powers during the war. These accounts describe vehicles that could hover, accelerate to incredible speeds, and perform maneuvers impossible for conventional aircraft. Some reports claim that several American aircraft were destroyed during these encounters and that casualties were suffered. The expedition's abrupt termination and Admiral Byrd's subsequent warnings about a new threat from the polar regions take on new significance in light of these claims. If Nazi scientists had indeed established a base in Antarctica and were testing advanced aircraft there, it would explain why Operation High Jump was cut short and why subsequent decades saw continued military interest in the continent. While visible surface anomalies and historical mysteries are intriguing, perhaps the most scientifically verified and unexplainable Antarctic anomalies are the thermal signatures detected beneath the ice. In multiple locations across Antarctica, satellites equipped with thermal imaging and ground-penetrating radar have detected areas producing heat that has no conventional explanation. These aren't minor temperature variations, but significant thermal anomalies hot enough to melt ice from below, creating cavities and weakening the ice sheet in ways that shouldn't occur naturally. The most significant thermal anomaly is located in Marie Byrd Land, a region of West Antarctica named after Admiral Byrd's wife. In 2017, researchers announced the discovery of a mantle plume beneath this region, a rising column of hot rock from deep within the Earth that was generating heat equivalent to Yellowstone's geothermal activity. The official explanation attributes the heat to this mantle plume, a geological feature that exists in several locations around the world. But there are problems with this explanation. The thermal output detected in Marie Byrd Land is inconsistent with typical mantle plume activity. The heat is concentrated in specific locations rather than spread out over a broad area as would be expected from a geological heat source. And most puzzling, the thermal intensity varies over time, increasing and decreasing in patterns that suggest active regulation rather than passive geological processes. Natural geothermal heat doesn't turn on and off. It doesn't pulse or vary in regular cycles. Yet monitoring stations in Antarctica have detected exactly these kinds of patterns. Thermal sensors record temperature increases at specific locations, sustained for periods of hours or days, then dropping back to baseline levels. This cyclic behavior is characteristic of technological heat sources like power plants or industrial operations, not geological phenomena. When questioned about these anomalies, scientists attribute them to measurement errors, sensor malfunctions, or misinterpretation of data. But multiple independent measurement systems have detected the same patterns, and the probability that all these systems are malfunctioning in identical ways approaches zero. The heat signatures have practical consequences that can't be ignored. Ice shelves in regions where thermal anomalies have been detected are melting faster than climate models predict. Cavities are forming beneath the ice, creating instability and increasing the risk of catastrophic ice shelf collapse. These localized melting events don't correlate with atmospheric temperature or ocean currents the way normal ice loss does. The melting is happening from below, driven by heat rising through the ice from sources beneath the surface. Climate scientists monitoring Antarctica's ice loss are puzzled by these anomalies, which skew their models and create unexplained accelerations in melting rates. One particularly intriguing thermal anomaly was detected near the Thwaites Glacier, one of Antarctica's largest glaciers and a major contributor to sea level rise. Researchers studying the glacier's accelerating melt rate discovered a massive cavity beneath the ice, roughly the size of Manhattan and about 1,000 feet high. The cavity is growing rapidly, much faster than can be explained by ocean water temperatures alone. Thermal imaging revealed heat sources within the cavity, concentrated hot spots that shouldn't exist in what should be a uniformly cold environment. These hot spots don't correspond to known volcanic activity or geothermal vents. They appear to be discrete sources of heat positioned in patterns that some researchers believe are too regular to be natural. The presence of liquid water beneath Antarctica's ice sheet is itself a mystery that's only recently been appreciated. Scientists have identified nearly 400 subglacial lakes scattered across the continent, ranging in size from small ponds to massive bodies of water like Lake Vostok. These lakes exist in complete darkness, cut off from the surface for millions of years, under immense pressure from the overlying ice. The conventional explanation is that geothermal heat and pressure keep the water liquid, but the number and distribution of these lakes, along with their varying temperatures, suggests something more complex than simple geothermal warming. Some of these subglacial lakes are connected by rivers and channels, creating a network of liquid water beneath the ice sheet. Radar mapping has traced these channels extending for hundreds of miles, creating what amounts to an underground river system flowing through caverns and voids in the rock beneath the ice. The water in this system doesn't behave as you'd expect from simple meltwater. It flows in patterns that suggest active circulation, with temperature differences between regions that indicate heat sources warming specific areas. The entire system resembles an engineered network more than a natural hydrological feature. Researchers who have managed to access these subglacial environments report strange findings. Water samples contain not just extremophile bacteria, but complex organic molecules that seem out of place in such an isolated environment. Chemical analysis reveals trace elements and compounds that shouldn't be present in water that's been isolated for millions of years. Some samples show evidence of artificial chemicals, synthetic compounds that don't occur naturally, and that suggest contamination from industrial sources. But how could industrial contamination reach water sealed beneath miles of ice? Unless the contamination originated from something already beneath the ice, something that's been there far longer than human industrial civilization. The exploration of Antarctica's subglacial environment is severely restricted. The Antarctic Treaty and subsequent protocols place strict limits on drilling, sampling, and exploration activities. The justification is environmental protection, preventing contamination of pristine ecosystems. But the restrictions are so severe that they effectively prevent any thorough investigation of the very anomalies that most need explaining. Researchers who want to drill into subglacial lakes or explore underground cavities face years of bureaucratic obstacles, denied permits, and funding rejections. The message is clear. Whatever is beneath Antarctica's ice, someone doesn't want it explored too thoroughly. Navigation in Antarctica has always been problematic due to its proximity to the South Magnetic Pole. Compasses don't point reliably toward true south, and magnetic declination, the angle between magnetic north and true north, varies wildly depending on your location. This is understood and expected. What's not expected or understood are the localized magnetic anomalies scattered across Antarctica that create zones where magnetic fields behave in ways that defy all conventional physics. These anomalies were first noticed by early explorers whose compasses would suddenly spin uselessly or point in completely wrong directions. At the time, this was attributed to the proximity of the magnetic pole and the generally disturbed magnetic field in polar regions. But as mapping technology improved and satellites began measuring Antarctica's magnetic field from orbit, it became clear that these anomalies were discrete localized phenomena, not just general magnetic disturbance. Some areas of Antarctica have magnetic field strengths hundreds of times higher than the surrounding region. Others show reversed polarity, with magnetic north pointing south and vice versa. And still others show rapidly fluctuating fields that change strength and direction in patterns that appear non-random. The Lake Vostok magnetic anomaly mentioned earlier is one of the strongest. The magnetic field strength over the southern end of the lake is so intense that it interferes with satellite measurements and creates a black spot in magnetic survey data. To generate such a powerful magnetic field requires either massive deposits of magnetic minerals like magnetite or the presence of something with electromagnetic properties far exceeding natural rock. Geological surveys of the area, limited though they are, haven't found evidence of mineral deposits sufficient to explain the anomaly. The magnetic signature doesn't match any known geological formation. It's as if something incredibly magnetic is buried beneath the lake, something that isn't rock. Another major magnetic anomaly is located in Wilkes Land, a region of East Antarctica. In 2006, scientists using gravity and magnetic field measurements detected what they described as a massive impact crater buried beneath the ice, roughly 300 miles in diameter. They theorized it was created by an asteroid impact about 250 million years ago during the Permian extinction event, the most severe mass extinction in Earth's history. The impact would have released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons and triggered global devastation. While this explanation sounds plausible, the magnetic signature of the Wilkes Land anomaly doesn't match typical impact craters. Impact craters show disrupted magnetic fields due to shock effects on the rock, but the Wilkes Land anomaly shows an organized, structured magnetic field suggestive of something with internal magnetic organization rather than random rock shocked by impact. What could create such organized magnetic fields? On Earth, the only natural process that generates strong, organized magnetic fields is the geodynamo in our planet's core, where convection of molten iron creates our global magnetic field. Smaller-scale magnetic fields can be created by concentrated mineral deposits, but these are relatively weak and disorganized. To get strong, organized magnetic fields requires electrical currents flowing through conductive materials, the kind of electromagnetic effects produced by power generation or electrical machinery. Unless natural processes we don't understand are creating these effects, the implication is that something artificial is generating the magnetic anomalies. Pilots who fly over these magnetic anomaly zones report instrument failures, compass deviations, and electronic glitches. In some cases, aircraft have experienced complete electrical system failures requiring emergency landings. These incidents are officially attributed to atmospheric conditions or equipment malfunctions, but the correlation with specific geographical locations suggests otherwise. Ships navigating Antarctic waters near certain coastal regions experience similar problems, with onboard electronics failing and navigation systems giving wildly incorrect readings. The zones where these effects occur correspond precisely with the locations of magnetic anomalies detected by satellite surveys. There are also reports of temporal anomalies associated with some magnetic zones. Personnel at research stations near certain areas have reported experiencing time distortions, where hours seem to pass in minutes or minutes stretch out interminably. These reports are dismissed as psychological effects from the isolation and extreme environment, but they're consistent across multiple personnel and multiple stations. Some researchers have suggested that intense magnetic fields might affect human perception of time, though the mechanism for such an effect isn't understood. More intriguingly, some have proposed that the magnetic anomalies might actually affect space-time itself, creating localized distortions similar to those predicted by Einstein's general relativity near massive gravitational fields. The Antarctic magnetic anomalies may also be connected to the continent's unusual auroral activity. Auroras, the northern and southern lights, are caused by charged particles from the sun interacting with Earth's magnetic field. In Antarctica, auroras are frequent and spectacular, but they also show unusual characteristics. Some Antarctic auroras appear in colors not seen in northern auroras, including unusual purples and greens. Others pulse or move in patterns that don't match the typical rippling curtains of normal auroral displays. And in some cases, auroras appear in locations and at times when solar activity doesn't predict them, suggesting they're being triggered by something other than solar wind. Could the magnetic anomalies be generating their own auroral effects through electromagnetic emissions? If powerful electromagnetic sources exist beneath the ice, they might be ejecting charged particles that interact with the atmosphere to create artificial auroras. This might explain the unusual colors and behaviors of Antarctic auroras, as well as their occurrence during periods of low solar activity. It would also suggest that whatever is creating the magnetic anomalies is emitting energy into the surrounding environment, energy powerful enough to ionize atmospheric gases and create visible light displays. The mystery of Antarctica deepens when we examine historical documents that seem to show impossible knowledge of the continent. The Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, shows the coastline of South America with remarkable accuracy for its time. But it also shows something else, a landmass in the position of Antarctica, depicted with coastal features that match the actual Antarctic coastline as it exists beneath the ice. The problem is that Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years after the map was drawn. Even more puzzling, the continent has been covered by ice for millions of years, so the coastal features shown on the map shouldn't have been visible to any mapmaker in recorded history. Piri Reis himself wrote notes on the map, explaining that he compiled it from 20 older source maps, some dating back to the 4th century BCE or earlier. This suggests that ancient civilizations possess geographical knowledge that has been lost and only partially preserved in maps copied and recopied through the centuries. The accuracy of the Peary Race map in depicting the South American coast was verified by modern surveys and found to be extraordinary for its time. The depiction of Antarctica, while less detailed, shows the continent's general shape and includes geographical features like rivers and mountains that exist beneath the current ice sheet, but wouldn't have been visible for thousands of years. The Oronteus Phineus map from 1531 provides another impossible view of Antarctica. This map shows the entire continent with surprising detail, including interior features like rivers and mountain ranges. It depicts Antarctica as ice-free with a habitable coastline. The shapes and proportions aren't perfect, but they're recognizable as Antarctica when compared to modern maps. How could a 16th century cartographer depict a continent that wouldn't be officially explored until the 19th and 20th centuries? And how could he show it ice-free, complete with rivers and topographical details, unless he was working from much older sources created when the continent actually was ice-free? The Boitsch map from 1737 goes even further. Philippe Boitsch was a French geographer who created a map showing Antarctica divided into two land masses separated by a waterway. This map was created over 80 years before Antarctica was discovered, yet modern surveys using ice-penetrating radar have confirmed that beneath the ice sheet, Antarctica is indeed divided into two major land masses, West Antarctica and East Antarctica, separated by a region that would be a waterway if the ice melted. Boitsch's map shows knowledge of Antarctic geography that wasn't confirmed by modern science until the 1950s. Where did this knowledge come from? These maps suggest that someone, at some time in the distant past, mapped Antarctica when it was ice-free or partially ice-free. The knowledge was preserved in ancient maps that were copied through subsequent generations, with the copiers not understanding what they were depicting. By the time European cartographers were working with these sources, the original context had been lost, but the geographical information remained. This implies that a civilization with advanced surveying and mapping capabilities existed during a period when Antarctica was ice-free, which according to geological timelines would be at least 6,000 years ago, and possibly much longer. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about maps and geographical knowledge possessed by earlier civilizations. He mentioned that the priests of Egypt claimed to possess records going back tens of thousands of years, including maps of the entire world as it existed in ancient times. Plato's account of Atlantis describes an advanced maritime civilization that existed around 9,600 BCE, destroyed by catastrophic events. He claimed his information came from Egyptian priests who had preserved ancient records. Whether or not Atlantis existed as a literal place, the consistency of ancient accounts describing advanced, pre-flood civilizations suggests that such societies may indeed have existed and that their geographical knowledge, preserved in maps and texts, survived in fragments to influence later cartography. If an advanced civilization existed in Antarctica or mapped Antarctica during an ice-free period, what happened to them? The conventional answer would be that no such civilization existed, that the maps are either forgeries or misinterpretations. But the verified accuracy of these maps in depicting geographical features unknown to their supposed creators argues against forgery. The alternative is that human civilization is much older than we believe, that sophisticated societies existed during the last ice age or even earlier, and that these societies possess technological capabilities, allowing them to explore and map the entire globe, including Antarctica. The Antarctic Treaty's restrictions on archaeological exploration make it difficult to test this hypothesis. Digging for ruins or artifacts in Antarctica requires permits that are nearly impossible to obtain. The official reason is environmental protection, but the effect is to prevent any serious archaeological investigation of the continent. If ruins of an ancient civilization exist beneath the ice, they remain hidden and unstudied. The few surface features that suggest artificial construction, like the pyramid structures discussed earlier, are dismissed without thorough examination. The possibility that Antarctica holds evidence of lost chapters of human history is rejected not because it's been investigated and disproven, but because investigating it is essentially forbidden. Antarctica is home to unique ecosystems adapted to extreme conditions, but recent discoveries have revealed forms of life that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of biology and evolution. In 2015, researchers drilling through the Ross Ice Shelf discovered thriving communities of fish and other complex organisms living in water below nearly 3,000 feet of ice in conditions of complete darkness and near freezing temperatures. The water in this subglacial environment had been isolated from sunlight and the surface ecosystem for thousands of years, yet complex life not only survived, but thrived. The conventional explanation is that these organisms survive on nutrients that filter down from above or are produced by chemosynthetic bacteria that derive energy from chemicals rather than sunlight. But the biomass observed beneath the ice shelf exceeds what could be sustained by these limited nutrient sources. The organisms are too numerous, too active, and too diverse to be explained by scavenging scarce nutrients. Something is providing energy to this ecosystem, supporting a food chain that includes predatory fish, bottom-dwelling organisms, and complex invertebrates. What's the energy source? Even more mysterious are the bacteria discovered in ice core samples from deep beneath Lake Vostok and other subglacial lakes. These bacteria possess genetic sequences that don't match any known terrestrial life forms. Their DNA includes genes that appear completely novel, coding for proteins and enzymes that scientists can't identify or explain. The genetic divergence is so extreme that some researchers have suggested these organisms represent a separate tree of life, evolved in isolation for so long that they've become fundamentally different from surface life. But the timescales required for such extreme genetic divergence are measured in hundreds of millions of years, far longer than these lakes have been isolated. Could these organisms be remnants of ancient life forms that existed on Antarctica when it was warmer, preserved in the ice, and now thriving in the isolated subglacial environments? This would push back the timeline of complex life and suggest that ecosystems we thought were recent actually have much deeper roots. Or could these organisms have been introduced to Antarctica by something other than natural migration? If an advanced civilization inhabited Antarctica in the distant past, they might have brought organisms with them, possibly even engaged in genetic engineering that produced novel life forms. These engineered organisms, sealed beneath the ice when Antarctica froze, could have continued evolving in isolation, producing the genetic anomalies we're now discovering. There are also reports of much larger organisms in Antarctica's subglacial waters, though these remain unverified and highly speculative. Sonar readings from Lake Vostok have detected large moving objects, far bigger than any fish, swimming through the lake's depths. These readings are dismissed as equipment errors or misinterpretations of ice movements, but multiple separate instruments have recorded similar signatures. If accurate, they would indicate the presence of large animals, possibly marine mammals or something else entirely, surviving in an environment completely cut off from the surface. How such creatures could exist, what they feed on, and where they came from are questions that remain unanswered because accessing Lake Vostok for detailed biological surveys has been effectively prevented. On Antarctica's surface, researchers have found organic materials in ice cores that predate the current ice sheet. These materials include pollen, plant remains, and even insect parts from species that require warm climates. The presence of these organic materials isn't surprising given that Antarctica was once warmer. What's surprising is their excellent preservation and the implications for what else might be preserved beneath the ice. If plant and insect remains can survive millions of years frozen in ice, what about larger structures? What about artifacts of civilization? Ice is one of the best preservation mediums known, protecting organic and inorganic materials from decay. If an advanced civilization existed on Antarctica, their remains would be perfectly preserved, waiting to be discovered. While historical anomalies and geological mysteries are fascinating, Antarctica continues to be the site of strange and unexplained incidents in modern times. Personnel at Antarctic research stations report unusual phenomena with surprising frequency, experiences that don't fit the expected patterns of life on an isolated ice-covered continent. Some of these reports can be dismissed as the effects of extreme isolation, sensory deprivation, and harsh conditions on human psychology. But others involve multiple witnesses, physical evidence, or instrumental recordings that can't be explained away so easily. One recurring phenomenon reported by station personnel is the appearance of unusual lights in the sky. These aren't auroras, which are common in Antarctica and easily recognizable. These are structured lights that move with apparent purpose, accelerate suddenly, hover motionlessly, and perform maneuvers that no conventional aircraft can achieve. Witnesses describe seeing spherical objects glowing with different colors, sometimes pulsing or changing intensity. In some cases, multiple objects appear together, moving in formation with precise coordination. Photography and video of these objects exist, though the footage is often dismissed as lens flares, ice crystals, or atmospheric phenomena. In 2004, personnel at the Norwegian Troll Station reported observing a large triangular object hovering silently over the ice sheet. The object had lights at each corner and remained stationary for approximately 15 minutes before accelerating straight up and disappearing. Multiple witnesses saw the object, and it was tracked on radar before the radar contact was lost at impossible speeds. The incident was reported to Norwegian authorities but generated no official investigation. When researchers at the station tried to discuss the event publicly, they were instructed to remain silent by their superiors, and the matter was officially declared a meteorological misidentification. The Russian Vostok station, located near Lake Vostok, has been the site of numerous strange incidents. Personnel there report hearing sounds coming from beneath the ice, deep rumbling noises that don't correspond to any known geological activity. The sounds are sometimes rhythmic, repeating in patterns that suggest machinery or engine noises rather than natural phenomena. Seismometers at the station record these acoustic events, confirming that they're real, not imagined. But the official explanation attributes them to ice movements or settling, despite the fact that ice movements produce very different acoustic signatures and don't create rhythmic patterns. In 2001, a team of Russian researchers at Vostok reported that one of their members suffered a mysterious illness after working near the drill site. The individual experienced severe disorientation, memory loss, and neurological symptoms that persisted for weeks. Medical examination found no obvious cause for the symptoms, no exposure to toxins or infectious agents. Other team members began experiencing similar but less severe symptoms, including headaches, nausea, and cognitive impairment. The team was eventually evacuated, and the drill site was temporarily closed. The official explanation was contamination from drilling fluids, but samples of the drilling fluids showed no toxic compounds. Some researchers speculated that the team had been exposed to something in the ice or water, perhaps exotic bacteria or chemical compounds of unknown origin. The Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station, located directly at the geographic South Pole, has its own collection of strange incidents. Station personnel report malfunctioning electronic equipment with no apparent cause, doors that open and close on their own, and unusual electromagnetic disturbances that interfere with communications. In 2016, the station experienced a complete power failure that lasted for several hours, despite backup systems that should have prevented such an outage. During the blackout, personnel reported seeing lights outside the station that moved and changed color, though no explanation for the lights was ever provided. When power was restored, certain computer systems had been wiped clean, losing months of research data with no indication of how the data loss occurred. There are also reports of personnel encountering phenomena during traverses across the ice sheet, far from any research station. Expeditions have reported finding unusual tracks in the snow that don't match any known animal or vehicle. Some of these tracks are impossibly large, suggesting creatures or machines of enormous size. In other cases, the tracks simply appear suddenly in previously unmarked snow, with no indication of where they came from or how they started. Photographs of these tracks exist, but they're typically explained as wind patterns or unusual snow formations rather than genuine anomalies. 1. Particularly disturbing incident occurred in 2012 when a Chilean research team exploring a remote region of the Antarctic Peninsula discovered what appeared to be an entrance to an underground facility. The entrance was a rectangular opening in the ice approximately 30 feet wide and 20 feet high, leading into darkness. The team photographed the entrance and attempted to explore inside, but found their way blocked by what they described as a metallic door or barrier about 50 feet into the tunnel. The door appeared to be made of a smooth gray metal with no visible seams or mechanisms for opening. The team reported the discovery to Chilean authorities and requested permission to return with equipment to investigate further. Permission was denied, and when the team tried to return on their own, they found the entrance had been filled in with ice and snow. Whether this filling was natural or deliberate remains unclear. Disappearances in Antarctica, while rare, have occurred under circumstances that raise questions. In 1999, an Australian physicist working at the Amundsen-Scott station left the facility and walked out onto the ice sheet, disappearing without a trace. Despite extensive search efforts, no sign of him was ever found. His last communication suggested he was investigating something he'd observed from the station, but he didn't specify what. Some of his colleagues reported that in the days before his disappearance, he'd been acting strangely and talking about having made a significant discovery. His research notes were confiscated by authorities, and their contents have never been made public. In 2013, 2 American researchers conducting a study on the Ross Ice Shelf failed to return from a routine survey mission. Search parties found their snowmobiles abandoned approximately 10 miles from their base camp. The vehicles were in perfect working order with no signs of mechanical failure. Personal belongings, including food, water, and communication equipment, were left behind. But the researchers themselves had vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication of what might have caused them to leave their vehicles and equipment. Footprints led away from the snowmobiles, but terminated after about 100 yards, as if the individuals had simply lifted off the ground. The official conclusion was that they became disoriented and died from exposure, but their bodies were never recovered despite thorough searches of the area. Electronic equipment failures are commonplace in Antarctica due to the extreme cold, but some failures follow patterns that suggest interference rather than environmental damage. GPS units frequently malfunction in certain regions, showing incorrect positions or losing satellite lock entirely. Radio communications experience unexplained static and interference, with signals sometimes carrying strange sounds or what some operators have described as voices. Speaking in unknown languages. Computer systems crash or reboot spontaneously, and data corruption occurs at rates far higher than would be expected from hardware failures alone. While individual incidents can be explained as equipment problems, the clustering of these failures in specific locations and at specific times suggests something more systematic. Psychological effects on Antarctic personnel are well documented and expected given the isolation and extreme environment. Seasonal affective disorder, cabin fever, and sensory deprivation are all common. However, some personnel report experiences that go beyond normal psychological responses to isolation. These include vivid dreams or visions that multiple people share, experiencing the same imagery at the same time, feeling presences or being watched when alone in remote areas, hearing voices or music when no source is present, experiencing time distortions where hours pass in what feels like minutes, or vice versa. While these could all be attributed to psychological stress, the consistency of reports across different stations, different years, and different individuals suggests they might reflect something in the Antarctic environment itself. The advent of high-resolution satellite imagery has revolutionized our ability to observe Antarctica, revealing features and anomalies that ground-based exploration never detected. But it's also revealed something else: evidence of systematic censorship and obscuring of certain regions in publicly available satellite data. When civilian researchers began using Google Earth and other satellite mapping services to examine Antarctica in detail, they discovered numerous locations where image quality suddenly degraded, where obvious blurring or pixelation obscured features, or where images from different dates had been poorly stitched together to hide something. These censored regions aren't randomly distributed. They cluster in areas where other anomalies have been reported, near Lake Vostok, in the region showing thermal anomalies, around the pyramid structures, and in locations where magnetic anomalies are strongest. The official explanation is that these are simply areas where high-resolution imagery isn't available, that the image processing algorithms produce artifacts when dealing with the uniform white landscape of ice and snow. But satellite imagery of other ice-covered regions like Greenland or Arctic sea ice doesn't show the same degree of censorship. The problems are specific to Antarctica and specific to particular locations within Antarctica. Independent analysis of satellite imagery has revealed structures that appear artificial but which are absent from official maps. Researchers have identified what looks like the remains of buildings, rectangular foundations extending for hundreds of feet in geometric patterns. Linear features that resemble roads or runways, perfectly straight lines cutting across natural terrain. Circular formations that could be ancient settlements or modern facilities. In some cases, these features are visible in older satellite imagery, but absent or obscured in more recent images, suggesting active efforts to remove them from public view. One particularly intriguing discovery made through satellite analysis is a formation in Queen Maud Land that resembles a massive face carved into the mountainside. The feature is approximately 600 feet tall, showing what appears to be eyes, nose, and mouth in proportions similar to a human face. Skeptics argue it's pareidolia, the tendency to see faces in random patterns. But the symmetry and proportions are remarkably precise, and geological analysis of the feature shows erosion patterns inconsistent with natural weathering. The face appears to be looking upward, as if gazing at the sky, and its orientation aligns with astronomical features in a way that suggests intentional positioning. Another satellite discovery is a series of perfectly circular holes in the ice, each approximately 300 feet in diameter, arranged in a straight line extending for miles. These holes appear in ice shelf regions and seem to penetrate through the ice to the water below. They're not natural polynyas, areas of open water that form due to currents or weather conditions, because polynyas are irregularly shaped and don't form in straight lines. The holes appear too perfect, too uniformly sized, and too precisely arranged to be natural. Some researchers have suggested they're bore holes from drilling operations, but their size would require drilling equipment far larger than anything known to exist. Others have proposed they're created by something rising from beneath the ice, punching through at regular intervals. Thermal imaging satellites have revealed the extent of heated regions beneath Antarctica's ice. In addition to the major thermal anomalies already discussed, there are numerous smaller hotspots scattered across the continent. When mapped, these hotspots form patterns that some analysts believe are too organized to be random geological features. They appear to be arranged in grids or along straight lines, suggestive of infrastructure rather than natural heat sources. In some regions, the pattern of thermal anomalies resembles a city layout with a central concentrated area surrounded by smaller distributed points, like a downtown core with suburbs. Radar satellites capable of penetrating ice have revealed the topography beneath Antarctica's ice sheet in unprecedented detail. These surveys have confirmed the existence of vast cavern systems, underground voids large enough to house significant structures. Some of these caverns are natural, formed by volcanic activity or water erosion, but others show features that look suspiciously regular: walls that are too straight, floors that are too flat, cavities that are too circular. In a few locations, radar has detected what appear to be artificial structures within these caverns, geometric shapes with right angles and symmetrical features that don't occur in natural cave formations. The most heavily censored satellite images are those of the region near the geographic South Pole. High-resolution imagery of the Amundsen-Scott station itself is available, but the surrounding areas show consistent degradation in image quality. Attempts to obtain commercial satellite imagery of these regions are denied by satellite operators without explanation. Researchers who've requested specific imagery for scientific purposes report that their requests are rejected or ignored when they specify coordinates in certain Antarctic regions. This selective unavailability of imagery suggests that someone is actively preventing civilian observation of particular locations. Military satellites presumably have access to high-resolution imagery of all Antarctic regions, including those censored in civilian satellite services. But military imagery is classified and not available to researchers or the public. This raises the question of what military satellites have observed in Antarctica that warrants classification. If nothing unusual exists on the continent, why classify the imagery? The standard justification is operational security and protection of military capabilities, but Antarctica has no military operations according to the Antarctic Treaty. The classification of Antarctic imagery suggests there are activities or features that governments don't want publicly revealed. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Antarctic mystery isn't the anomalies themselves, but the systematic suppression of information about them. Scientists who've worked in Antarctica and observed unusual phenomena often find themselves unable to speak publicly about their experiences. Non-disclosure agreements, classification of research data, and pressure from funding agencies and employers create an environment where asking the wrong questions or reporting the wrong observations can end a scientific career. This culture of silence means that much of what's known about Antarctic anomalies remains hidden, shared only in private conversations among researchers who trust each other not to report them. Several former Antarctic researchers have come forward as whistleblowers, though their accounts are often dismissed or ignored by mainstream media and scientific institutions. One such individual, a geologist who worked at McMurdo Station in the early 2000s, claims to have been part of a team that discovered ancient ruins approximately 100 miles inland from the station. According to his account, the team found stone structures partially buried in ice, including what appeared to be walls, foundations, and carved monuments. The structures were made of precisely fitted stone blocks, similar to megalithic constructions found in South America. The team documented the discovery with photographs and measurements, but when they returned to base and reported their findings, they were ordered to cease all discussion of the matter. Their photographs and notes were confiscated, and they were required to sign expanded non-disclosure agreements threatening severe legal consequences for revealing what they'd found. The official explanation given was that the structures were natural rock formations misinterpreted due to the extreme conditions. Another whistleblower, an atmospheric scientist who worked at the South Pole Station, describes observing unusual aircraft in Antarctic skies. These weren't the standard LC-130 cargo planes that supply the stations. They were vehicles of unknown design, moving at speeds and with capabilities far beyond conventional aircraft. He claims to have discussed these observations with other station personnel who confirmed seeing similar craft. When he attempted to photograph one of these objects, his camera malfunctioned, and later examination showed the memory card had been completely wiped. He was subsequently warned by station management not to discuss or attempt to document unusual aerial phenomena, with vague threats about the consequences of violating operational security. A former drill technician who worked on the Lake Vostok drilling project claims that the team retrieved far more than bacterial samples from the lake. According to his account, early samples brought up from the lake contained metallic fragments of unknown composition, objects that appeared to be manufactured rather than natural. These fragments were immediately classified and removed from the site by personnel who weren't part of the regular drilling team. The drill technician was told that the fragments were contamination from the drilling equipment, but he insists they were unlike any material used in the drill assembly. He describes the fragments as being extremely hard, with a silvery metallic luster, and showing what looked like machining marks or deliberate shaping. After this discovery, security at the site was dramatically increased, and civilian researchers found their access restricted. A climatologist who studied ice cores from various Antarctic locations reports finding anomalous materials embedded in ice layers dated to thousands of years ago. These materials included metal fragments, synthetic fibers, and what appeared to be processed glass. When she submitted these findings for peer review, her paper was rejected by multiple journals without substantive explanation. Colleagues advised her to drop the research, warning that pursuing it would damage her reputation and career prospects. She eventually published a limited analysis of the findings that omitted the most controversial elements, but even this sanitized version generated hostile responses from other researchers. She now believes that certain discoveries in Antarctica are being actively suppressed by the scientific establishment. The pattern of suppression extends beyond individual researchers to institutional policies. Scientific proposals for Antarctic research that involve investigating anomalies or unusual findings face systematic rejection. Funding agencies that support Antarctic research have unwritten guidelines against proposals that challenge conventional understanding of the continent's history and nature. Research teams that make unexpected discoveries are often disbanded, their funding terminated, and their data archived in classified collections inaccessible to other scientists. This creates a chilling effect where researchers learn to avoid certain topics and questions if they want their careers to survive. Some whistleblowers claim that multiple governments operate secret programs in Antarctica that go far beyond the published scientific research. These programs allegedly involve exploration of the subglacial environment, investigation of discovered structures and artifacts, and attempts to understand or reverse engineer technologies found beneath the ice. Personnel for these programs are supposedly recruited from military and intelligence services rather than academic institutions, ensuring loyalty and compliance with secrecy requirements. While these claims cannot be verified, the level of security and restricted access in certain Antarctic regions seems excessive for simple environmental protection or scientific research. The Antarctic Treaty itself may be less about international cooperation for scientific research and more about managing access to discoveries that governments consider too sensitive for public knowledge. The treaty's restrictions on military activity, resource extraction, and territorial claims make sense from an environmental protection standpoint. But the treaty also effectively prevents independent exploration of the continent. All activity in Antarctica must be approved and monitored by governmental agencies. Private expeditions are prohibited. Unauthorized travel to certain regions can result in legal consequences. This level of control seems excessive unless there's something being protected beyond just pristine environment and scientific research sites. The anomalies in Antarctica don't exist in isolation. When examined in the context of mysteries found around the world, a pattern emerges suggesting connections to ancient civilizations that possessed advanced knowledge and capabilities. The pyramid structures in Antarctica echo pyramids found in Egypt, Central America, China, and other locations. The precision stonework suggested by some Antarctic discoveries matches megalithic construction techniques used by ancient cultures worldwide. The astronomical alignments reported for some Antarctic features parallel alignments found in ancient temples and monuments on every continent. These parallels suggest that whatever existed in Antarctica was part of a larger global civilization or network of advanced ancient cultures. Ancient texts and myths from various cultures describe a time when the world was different, when lands now frozen were temperate, when advanced civilizations existed in places now uninhabitable. Greek philosopher Plato described Atlantis, an advanced island civilization that sank beneath the waves. While most scholars place Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean if it existed at all, some researchers have proposed that Antarctica might be the true location of the legendary lost continent. Before it became frozen, Antarctica occupied a different position due to crustal displacement or Earth's shifting axis, placing it in a more temperate latitude where advanced civilization could flourish. Catastrophic climate shifts then froze the continent, burying its civilization under ice. Hindu texts describe cycles of creation and destruction, with advanced civilizations rising and falling over vast time periods. These texts speak of vimanas, flying machines used by ancient peoples, and weapons of immense destructive power. Similar descriptions appear in other ancient traditions from around the world. If these accounts preserve memories of actual advanced ancient societies, Antarctica could have been one of the centers of such civilization. Its remote location and subsequent freezing would have preserved evidence that was destroyed or eroded in other locations. The Piri Reis map and other ancient cartographic evidence suggest that Antarctica was known to ancient peoples. If they knew about Antarctica, they must have visited it. And if they visited it, they would have found it ice-free or partially ice-free. This requires pushing back the timeline of advanced maritime civilizations to at least 6,000 years ago, and possibly much earlier. It also requires acknowledging that these ancient peoples possessed navigation technology, shipbuilding capabilities, and geographical knowledge comparable to what European civilization achieved only in recent centuries. Genetic studies of ancient populations have revealed surprising connections between geographically distant peoples. DNA analysis shows evidence of transoceanic contact long before such contact was thought possible. Genetic markers common to South American and Polynesian populations suggest ancient migration routes across vast ocean distances. European genetic markers have been found in ancient American populations predating Columbus by thousands of years. These genetic connections require acknowledging that ancient peoples were far more mobile and capable of long-distance travel than conventionally believed. If they could cross the Pacific and Atlantic, they could certainly have reached Antarctica. The knowledge encoded in ancient monuments and texts includes information that seems impossible for peoples without advanced technology to possess. Precise astronomical observations requiring centuries of data collection, mathematical constants embedded in architectural proportions, descriptions of geological and cosmological phenomena that shouldn't have been observable with available technology. This knowledge either developed through unknown means or was inherited from earlier advanced civilizations. If the latter, Antarctica becomes a candidate for where such civilizations might have existed, with their knowledge preserved in scattered ruins beneath the ice. Some researchers have proposed that the Great Flood described in virtually every ancient culture's mythology was triggered by rapid melting of ice sheets at the end of the last ice age. This catastrophic sea level rise would have inundated coastal civilizations worldwide, destroying cities and forcing survivors to retreat to higher ground. If advanced civilizations existed in Antarctica during a warmer period, the onset of freezing conditions would have been equally catastrophic, forcing evacuation and abandonment of the continent. The survivors would have carried their knowledge to other lands, becoming the civilizing gods of myth who taught primitive peoples agriculture, architecture, astronomy, and other advanced skills. The possibility that Antarctica holds evidence of advanced ancient civilization has profound implications for our understanding of human history. It suggests that the development of civilization wasn't linear, progressing steadily from primitive to advanced. Instead, history may be cyclical, with civilizations rising to great heights, then collapsing due to catastrophes or internal failures, with knowledge being lost and rediscovered. We may not be the first advanced civilization on Earth. Previous societies may have achieved technological and scientific sophistication comparable to or exceeding our own, only to fall and leave behind ruins that we're only now beginning to find and recognize. The question of what's really happening in Antarctica today is as mysterious as the ancient anomalies buried beneath the ice. Why do world governments maintain such extensive operations on the continent? What justifies the enormous expense and logistical challenges of supplying remote bases in the harshest environment on Earth? The official answer is scientific research, climate monitoring, and international cooperation. But the scale and nature of operations in Antarctica seem disproportionate to these stated goals, suggesting agendas that aren't being publicly acknowledged. Multiple nations have significantly expanded their Antarctic presence in recent years. China has built new stations and increased its research personnel. Russia has modernized its facilities and extended its operations. The United States maintains its largest station at the South Pole and several other major facilities. These expansions are officially justified by increasing scientific interest in climate change and polar processes. But the timing and scale of expansion suggests competition for something beyond scientific prestige. Are nations racing to discover or claim something valuable in Antarctica? Are they responding to discoveries already made that indicate the presence of resources or technologies worth obtaining? Private interests have also begun showing unusual interest in Antarctica. Several wealthy individuals and corporations have funded expeditions and research projects on the continent. While some of this interest is framed as environmental conservation or scientific support, the level of private funding seems surprisingly high for a region with no apparent commercial value. Antarctica can't be exploited for resources under the Antarctic Treaty, and the continent has no permanent human population to serve as customers or workforce. What makes Antarctica attractive to private investment, if not the potential for discoveries or technologies that could prove enormously valuable? There's also the question of what technologies are being tested or deployed in Antarctica. The continent's isolation and harsh conditions make it ideal for testing equipment that needs to operate in extreme environments. Military satellites, communication systems, and survival equipment are all tested in Antarctic conditions. But some research stations have facilities that seem excessive for the stated purposes of climate research. Large power generation capabilities, extensive communication arrays, and infrastructure for supporting personnel far beyond the number officially stationed there all suggest activities beyond what's publicly acknowledged. The increasing ease of satellite observation and the growing capability of civilian analysis tools mean that it's becoming harder to keep Antarctic secrets. As more researchers use commercial satellite imagery to study the continent, more anomalies are being discovered and shared online. The Internet has enabled coordination among independent researchers who can now compare findings, share data, and collectively analyze evidence in ways that were impossible a generation ago. This distributed investigation may eventually uncover truths that official channels have kept hidden. Already, online communities have identified dozens of features in Antarctica that warrant further investigation, and some of these discoveries are forcing official responses and explanations. The next decade may see significant revelations about Antarctica as technology continues to advance and public interest grows. Ice-penetrating radar is becoming more capable, allowing detailed mapping of subglacial environments from aircraft and satellites. Autonomous vehicles capable of exploring beneath the ice sheet are being developed and tested. DNA sequencing technology may reveal the full extent of biological anomalies in Antarctic waters and ice, and increasing concern about climate change is directing more resources and attention toward Antarctica, which will make it harder to hide unusual findings from the scientific community and public. Some researchers believe we're on the verge of disclosures about Antarctica that will fundamentally change our understanding of Earth's history. They point to increasing hints from official sources, statements by political figures, and scientists suggesting there are discoveries in Antarctica that haven't been publicly revealed. Former astronaut Buzz Aldrin visited Antarctica in 2016 and tweeted about seeing evil itself, a tweet he later deleted. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Antarctica in 2016, becoming the highest-ranking American official to do so. Various religious leaders have visited the continent in recent years, an unusual pattern given Antarctica's lack of religious significance. These high-profile visits suggest something drawing attention to Antarctica beyond scientific interest. The question of disclosure raises complex issues. If significant discoveries have been made in Antarctica, why keep them secret? One possibility is that the discoveries challenge fundamental beliefs about history, religion, or humanity's place in the universe in ways that governments fear could cause social disruption. Evidence of advanced ancient civilizations would undermine religious narratives and historical timelines that many people's worldviews depend on. Evidence of extraterrestrial presence would raise questions about whether we're alone in the universe and whether contact has occurred in the past or present. Such revelations might be considered too destabilizing to release without careful preparation. Another possibility is that discoveries in Antarctica have technological or strategic value that nations want to preserve as competitive advantages. If advanced artifacts or technologies have been found, the nation that controls access to them and successfully reverse engineers them gains significant power over other nations. This would create strong incentives for secrecy, with nations competing to exploit discoveries while preventing rivals from accessing the same information. The Antarctic Treaty might serve as a framework for managing this competition, establishing rules that prevent open conflict while allowing controlled access to whatever has been discovered. There's also the possibility that what's been discovered in Antarctica is genuinely dangerous, posing risks that justify secrecy. Unknown biological agents sealed in ancient ice could be released as the ice melts, potentially causing pandemics. Unstable technologies from ancient civilizations might be hazardous if disturbed, or there might be knowledge preserved in Antarctic discoveries that humanity isn't ready to possess, information that could be misused with catastrophic consequences. In this scenario, secrecy becomes a form of protection rather than control. As we reach the end of our journey through Antarctica's mysteries, we're left with more questions than answers. The accumulated evidence suggests that Antarctica is far more than a frozen wasteland. The thermal anomalies that can't be explained by geology, the magnetic fields that behave impossibly, the pyramid structures that mirror ancient constructions worldwide, the maps showing impossible knowledge of the continent, the biological anomalies that challenge our understanding of life, the systematic suppression of information and the barriers placed against investigation. Taken individually, each piece of evidence might be explained away, but taken together they form a pattern that demands acknowledgement and investigation. Something significant exists in Antarctica, something that governments and institutions have decided the public shouldn't know about. Whether it's ruins of an ancient advanced civilization, evidence of extraterrestrial presence, dangerous technologies, or knowledge, or something else entirely, the pattern of secrecy and suppression is undeniable. The restrictions on access, the classification of research, the career destruction of whistleblowers, the censoring of satellite imagery, all point to a coordinated effort to control information about the continent. The official narrative presents Antarctica as a pristine scientific laboratory where international cooperation serves the cause of knowledge and environmental protection. This narrative is comfortable and reassuring. It positions humanity as responsible stewards of Earth's last wilderness, united in the pursuit of understanding rather than divided by competition and conflict. But the evidence suggests this narrative is incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst. The reality of Antarctica appears to be far stranger and more significant than we're being told. What lies beneath the ice? Ancient cities frozen in time, preserving evidence of civilizations that preceded our own. Extraterrestrial artifacts or bases, explaining the impossible aerial phenomena and technological anomalies. Natural resources or geological features of immense value, driving secret competition among nations. Technologies or knowledge that could revolutionize human civilization or destroy it. The answer might be all of these things, or none of them. But the certainty that something significant is being hidden cannot be dismissed. The anomalies beneath Antarctica that were never explained remain unexplained because explanation requires investigation, and investigation is being actively prevented. Until the barriers to research are removed, until the classified data is released, until whistleblowers can speak without fear, and researchers can pursue truth without career consequences, we won't know the full truth about Antarctica. But we can know with confidence that the truth, whatever it is far more interesting and important than the sanitized version we're being fed. The ice is melting. Climate change, whatever its causes, is reducing Antarctica's ice sheet, exposing features that have been hidden for thousands or millions of years. As the ice recedes, the secrets it preserved will be revealed. Structures will emerge from their frozen tomb. Artifacts will become accessible. Evidence that has been sealed away will see daylight again. This may be why we're seeing increased activity in Antarctica, a race to discover and claim or control whatever emerges as the ice melts. Nations may be positioning themselves to be first to access the revelations, to shape the narrative around discoveries, to exploit whatever advantages those discoveries provide. We stand at a threshold moment in human history. The mysteries of Antarctica are on the verge of being unlocked, not by official science, but by the inexorable melting of ice and the determination of independent researchers unwilling to accept official silence. The truth about Earth's most mysterious continent will emerge, whether through deliberate disclosure or accidental revelation. When it does, it may force us to reconsider everything we believe about human civilization, about our planet's history, about our place in the cosmos. The anomalies beneath Antarctica that were never explained are waiting to be explained. The ruins buried under ice are waiting to be excavated. The technologies preserved in the frozen continent are waiting to be discovered. The knowledge held in ancient structures is waiting to be decoded, and the truth about what really exists at the bottom of the world is waiting to change everything we think we know. The question is whether we'll be ready for that truth when it finally emerges, whether we can handle the implications of discovering that our understanding of history and reality has been fundamentally incomplete. Antarctica keeps its secrets for now. But ice cannot hold secrets forever. Time and temperature are working against concealment, exposing what has been hidden, revealing what has been denied. The continent of mysteries is becoming a continent of revelations. And those revelations, when they fully emerge, will rewrite not just the history of Antarctica, but the history of humanity itself. The anomalies were never explained because the explanation would change everything. But change is coming whether we're ready for it or not. The ice is melting, and with it, the barriers between us and truths that have been hidden for far too long. The journey to uncover Antarctica's secrets continues. Every year brings new discoveries, new technologies for investigation, new researchers unwilling to accept official narratives. The truth is out there, buried beneath miles of ice, waiting patiently for the moment when it can no longer be contained. And when that moment comes, when the anomalies are finally explained and the mysteries are solved, we may discover that the frozen continent at the bottom of the world holds the key to understanding where we came from, what we're capable of, and where we're going. Until then, we can only watch, wonder, and prepare ourselves for revelations that may challenge everything we believe about our world and our place in it.